Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brittany. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. In today's video, we're going to be continuing on with our series of learning to read and understand commercial patterns. This video is going to be part 2 in that series. If you missed part 1, you can click this link and check it out. In that video, we covered all the information on the front and the back of patterns. So in today's video, we're going to open up the patterns and we're going to go over the general instructions and the sewing directions for the patterns. So let's go ahead and get started. So right here, you can see that I have pulled a couple different patterns right here. This McCall 7604 is what I used in the first video to go over the pattern envelope. I had 2 of the same pattern, so I was able to show you the different sizes. And then I also pulled this one because I was able to show you that sometimes all the sizes are included in one pattern. When I opened up the pattern instructions, I realized that I wanted to bring in another pattern, this Simplicity right here, just because the layout of the pattern instructions are a little bit different. The information is all the same, but the layout is a little different. So that's why I've decided I want to use this Simplicity one as well. This McCall's pattern right here is a Learn to Sew for Fun. So it's like a specific collection that McCall's has, and the instructions in this one, going to go ahead and pull these out. These instructions are geared toward absolute beginners. So if you are just starting to sew and you want instructions that go into great detail and just really elaborate on your layout, how to adjust patterns, how to pick your size, then this is a fantastic pattern for you to start with. But I did want to use this one because you won't see this layout across the board when you get a Butterick, when you get a Simplicity, a McCall, or a Vogue. So that is why I want to use these layouts. The information is all the same. The layout is just a little bit different. So I'm going to be using these right here in this video. So I'm going to go ahead and put this to the side. So let's go ahead and get started. When you open up your pattern envelope, you're going to have some instructions. So these instructions are from Simplicity 8606. And then you will also have your pattern pieces that you need to make the garments on this pattern. This right here are the pattern pieces. They're on this brown tissue paper. And your pattern will tell you how many pattern pieces have been given so that you'll be able to make the garments on the pattern. I'm going to put this to the side because we'll start working with the pattern tissue in part 3 of this series. So up here at the top, you can see you have your brand name as well as your pattern number. It also says 1 of 4. That 1 of 4 is just page 1 of 4 for your instructions. Under that, you can see that they have the line drawings printed here. So they're here as well as on the back of the pattern envelope. And beside that, you can see the pattern pieces. It tells you at the top that it has 12 pieces given for this pattern. And these right here are the pieces that you will need to sew the view that you decide you want to make. So let's just say you want to make view B on this pattern. Then you will come over here and you will find the pattern pieces that you need to make view B. So then you would come down here and you can see I've already circled the ones for view B. So the first one right here is the front and it says A and C. We're not making A and C, so we don't need to cut pattern piece number 1. So then we come down and that's for A, B, C, and D. I had to write that 2 back in, so I'm going to go ahead and circle it. And then you have your waistband for view A, B, C, and D. That's pattern piece number 3, so we need to cut that out. Pattern piece number 4 is the right tie-in, A, B, C, D. We need to cut that out. Pattern piece number 5 is the left tie-in, A, B, C, D. We need to cut that out. So what you would do is you would just come over here and you can circle or highlight the pattern pieces that you will need for the view that you're going to make. So for view B, we need pattern piece number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Once you have decided the view and the pattern pieces that you need, let's come over here to the general directions. Up at the top, you see the pattern. It has different symbols that you will find on it. So let's go ahead and review those. The first one right here is the grain line. The grain line is a line that has 2 arrows at the end of it. The grain line is placed on the straight grain of fabric parallel to the selvage. So let me bring in a piece of fabric so you can see what I mean if you don't know what the selvage edge of your fabric is. So this right here is the selvage edge of the fabric. It's a finished edge. Sometimes you will see the designer name printed on it or the store name printed on it, but this is the selvage edge. It is the finished edge. This right here is the cut edge. So when you take your fabric to the counter, this is the side that they will cut. and this right here is the fold of the fabric. So right now I have this fabric folded right sides facing, and this is the fold, this is the cut edge, and this right here is the salvage edge. When you see these lines on your pattern for the grain line, you need to make sure that you have it lined up parallel to the salvage edge. And one way that you can check to make sure that you're on grain is to line your pattern piece up, grab a measuring tape, and then you just want to measure across down the grain line over to the salvage to make sure that you are even and straight on the grain. The next symbol right here is place the solid line on the fold. So this right here is, when you see this, it's telling you to place this solid edge along the fold. So right here is the folded edge of the fabric. You would place that solid line right here along the fold of the fabric. The next symbol that we see right here is a line with a dot, line, dot, line, dot. For this pattern, is indicating the center, front, and back of the garment. Then you also have your notches and your dots. So you have your single notch, that's usually for the front of the garment, front of the sleeve. Double notches goes to the back of the sleeve. Then you have your large and small dots. This solid line right here is for your cutting line. If you're using a multi-size pattern, so maybe it has small, medium, large, extra large, you may have a solid line, you may have dotted lines. Your lines may differ, but that is the cutting line. This right here are your lengthening and shortening lines. So if you need to make adjustments, which are right here, adjustments if needed to lengthen or to shorten, it tells you right here how you can do that. To lengthen, you would need to cut the pattern between the lengthening and shortening lines and then separate them evenly, and then add the additional length that you need. If you need to shorten it, then you would just fold up on those lines. So when you see these lengthening and shortening lines, it's important to make the adjustment there, especially if you're just starting out and you're not quite sure where can you add or take away some length. Just start right there at those double lines, these lengthening and shortening lines, because the one thing you don't want to do is to just add length somewhere random on the pattern. That could start to change some of the design elements of the garment, and we don't want that. So whenever you see those parallel lines, if you need to make adjustments, just start there with those. Next, it talks about the seam allowance. The seam allowance for this pattern is 5/8 of an inch. So unless the pattern tells you at a different step to maybe sew something at a 3/8 of an inch, sew something at a 1/2 an inch, you sew the entire garment at 5/8 of an inch unless it's otherwise stated. And it will tell you at specific steps if you need to sew something at a different seam allowance. It also tells you to mark your size with a covered felt pen. So if you, again, have the multi-size pattern, which most patterns now come with multiple sizes, you can go ahead and highlight the line that you need to cut out. If you need to cut out the large, you can just kind of highlight that if you're just starting out, or you can just follow along that line and cut your pattern out. And then next, it tells you to see a chart on the tissue on how to use multi-size patterns. A lot of people bypass that on their tissue pattern, but in some simplicity patterns, they have a little guide on their brown tissue paper. It's like a 3-woman figure, and it tells you how to use the multi-size patterns. That is how I learned how to fit my body, because I'm in three pattern sizes. My bust is smaller, than my waist is in another size, my hips are in another size. So I have to merge between pattern lines to get it to fit my measurements. So that little guide is what helped me, and I'll be sure to share that and show it in part 3 of this series. So we've covered right here to adjust if needed with the lengthening and shortening. So right over here with the cutting and marking, it says before cutting, it says to press the pattern pieces with a warm, dry iron. So you can go over your pattern pieces since they are folded, it's tissue. You want to go ahead and press those pieces out nice and smooth, so they have you do that. And it says to pre-shrink fabric by pre-washing washables or steam pressing non-washables. I am team pre-treating. The last thing that you want to do is make a maxi dress and then you wash it, and then it's a knee-length dress when you're done because you didn't pre-treat your fabric. I'm pretty sure it won't shrink that much, but just go ahead and pre-wash your fabric. Take care of any shrinkage that may occur, the excess dyes and all that stuff. Go ahead and get it out of your fabric before you cut into it. Next up right here, it says to circle your cutting layout, and we're going to move down to that in just a moment. Pin the pattern pieces to the fabric as shown in the cutting layouts. And so let's talk about the double thickness when the fabric is folded right sides together, and I just showed you how that looks. Single thickness, you place the fabric right side up. So when you just need to cut out maybe one pattern piece, or maybe you have a pattern piece that's so big that it won't fit on your fabric folded, you need to cut that out on single layer. So what it means is just open up your fabric all the way out wide. There's no fold. The right side of the fabric is facing up, and then you would place your pattern piece down on that according to your layout and just cut it out one at a time, as opposed to cutting it out two when it's on the fold. Next up, it talks about your with nap layouts. The with nap layouts are for fabrics with a pile, shading, or one-way designs. So that's talking about your velvets, your corduroys, your animal prints. Maybe it's something with a bird or a giraffe, just all going in one direction. You need to make sure that you use the with nap layout because it has the pattern pieces all going in the same direction for those types of fabrics. Next over here, it talks about after cutting. So it tells you to transfer your markings to the wrong side of the fabric before removing the pattern. So you can use pens, you can use chalk, you can use the tracing paper in the wheel. What I like to do is I just like to put a pen between the circle or whatever marking it is. It could be a square, it could be a triangle. I just like to put a pen through it and transfer the markings on the wrong side of the fabric. And again, I'll show you that when we get further into the series. Right here, it talks about quick mark to snip the edge of the fabric to mark for notches, ends, fold lines, and center lines. That is what I like to do. I like to snip into my notches. Any place I see a fold line, I like to just snip the edge of it so then I know where I'm folding it. Now, I know my mom, when she cuts out her notches, she likes to cut out the triangle. Honestly, just do whatever works best for you. If you like to snip them or if you like to cut the triangle out, just mark for the notch. All right, so next let's move over here to the sewing section. So this right here says to sew the garment following the sewing directions. And then it says to pin or machine base matching the notches. So you all know I like to pin. I put my pins in, go to the machine, and then I go ahead and stitch my seam together. And then next it says to stitch 5/8 of an inch seam allowance unless otherwise stated. Press seams open unless otherwise indicated. Trim seams to reduce bulk as shown. So you have a little trimming diagram here. This one is to trim enclosed seams into layers. Maybe you just stitched together 3 or 4 layers. This right here is saying to layer those seams, especially if they're really bulky fabrics, because if you just trim them off, you're just basically shortening the bulk. So what you could do is trim one at maybe 1/4 of an inch, trim one at 3/8 of an inch, trim one at 1/2 an inch. That way you're layering out that bulk in that seam. The next one right here is to trim corners, how to clip into your curves, and how to notch the outer curves. This right here is so important because if you don't remove the bulk from your seams, then it won't lie flat and smooth like we all want our seams to look. Right over here, you have some special cutting notes, and I'm going to show you because this right here is a star. So when you see a star or this symbol right here, then you just come up here and refer to the special cutting notes, and it will tell you exactly what you need to do for that pattern piece. So now that we have covered all this information here along the top, let's move down to our cutting layout. So right here at the cutting layout, you see they have a little guide. It tells you the pattern printed side up is the gray shaded area. So this right here is the right side of the pattern piece, and the pattern printed side down is white. So this right here, they have flipped the pattern over and it's facing down. They also have a little guide here again that will indicate that you need to go to the special cutting notes if you see these two symbols. So the first thing when it comes to the cutting layout, you can see that each view has its own section. So even the interfacing has a little box up here with that one pattern piece number 3 that you need to cut out of interfacing, and then it has a cutting layout for you to show you how to do that. So this right here is for skirt A, you have one for skirt B, for skirt C, and then it tells you the cutting layout continues on the back with the rest of C and also for D. So let's just say that we want to go ahead and cut skirt A from this pattern. When it comes to picking your cutting layout, it's a couple things that you need to look out for to make sure that you're picking the right one. You can see right here on this pattern, for view A, you have 4 different cutting layouts. So the first thing that you want to do is, of course, go ahead and pick which view that you want to make. So right here with A. Then it tells you the pattern pieces that A needs. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So this right here is just like a double check to make sure that you cut the right pattern pieces up here. And then right here, you can see the first one is 2A. This 2A is for your 44 through 45 inch width fabric. It's also for width nap, so if you have a direction print, then you can use this layout. And it's for sizes 6, 8, 10, and 12. So if you did not cut that size, if you do not have that fabric width, this is not the layout for you. If you do have that fabric width and you have cut this size, then this is the cutting layout that you will use for cutting out your pattern pieces. It looks like this is all on single thickness, so this has the fabric opened out wide and it has the pattern pieces laying on here. So you are cutting these pieces out one at a time. The selvage edge here, the single thickness, so that is what that means for this cutting layout. This one right here, 2B, is again for 44 through 45 inch width fabric. It's for width nap design. So if your fabric has a direction print, it is okay to use this layout. And the sizes for this one is 14, 16, 18, 20, and 22. This is also cut on single thickness, so again, you will open your fabric out wide and you'll cut your pieces out one at a time. Over here we have 2C. 2C is for 58 through 60 inch wide fabric with nap, so you can use this if you have a direction print. This is for sizes 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, and it says to cut one of piece 4. So right here you can see this layout, and this has a fold. So you're going to be cutting this out with double thickness because you have the fabric folded right sides together. The next one right here, the layout 2D, is again for 50 inch through 60 inch wide fabric for with nap, so direction prints is good for this one. The layout is 16, 18, 20, 22, and then you cut one of pattern piece 4. And you can see again it says fold, so this has your fabric folded right sides facing. So when it comes to picking out the cutting layout, you pick it out based off of the garment that you want to make. You pick it off of the yardage of fabric that you have, whether you have 44, 45, 58, or 60. You also pick it off of the size that you have cut and if it is with nap or without nap. So those are the details that you need to look for when you get ready to cut out your cutting layout. And once you have decided, you can just go ahead and circle it so you'll know which cutting layout you're going to be using and how you need to lay out your pattern pieces on your fabric to cut everything out. Now let's go ahead and flip onto the back. You can see here that it continues at the top with the cutting layout for C. It also continues for D. Now, if this pattern had a lining, it would also have its own separate box, just like the interfacing, and it will tell you which pattern pieces need to be cut out of the lining. So right here at the sewing directions, you can see that it has a fabric key. So the gray is for the right side of the fabric, the white is for the wrong side. This interfacing, you will see it has like this little hashtag mark on it. And then the lining is a darker shade of gray. It also says to read the general directions on page 1 before you begin. The pattern pieces will be indicated by numbers the first time they are used, and to stitch the seams with right sides together unless otherwise stated. I do want to say that this fabric key is not like the standard across the board. Patterns will have their own fabric key, and you may see some differences between maybe like how they have listed the fabric side, how the interfacing is noted. So just make sure that you look at the fabric key for the pattern that you're using. And then once you have everything cut out, marked, and you're ready to go, you can just start with your instructions going step by step to sewing and making your garment. Now, if you are not making view A or C, then you need to flip through your pattern instructions until you find the view that you're going to be making. So if you're making B or D, just flip through, find those instructions, and then you can start there. When you get to something that says for B only, if you're not sewing B, then you can just skip over that and just come down to the view that you are making, and then you just continue sewing your project. So that right there covers the general directions. Like I said, it may be a couple tweaks, 1 or 2 things added from pattern to pattern, but for the most part, those are the general directions that you will see in Simplicity, McCall's, Butterick, and Vogue. I do want to show you something really quickly on this McCall's. So right here you can see this grain line. This grain line only has an arrow at one side, as opposed to this Simplicity one right here. You can see the grain line had 2 arrows. You can see place on fold, they have it written right here, but it's still the same exact thing. They also have your buttonhole marking on this guide. So if you're making button-up shirts, you'll see this marking on your pattern, as well as the button marking guide, which is an X. They also have the squares and triangles right here on this pattern. Again, just markings that you need to transfer when you see them. This little symbol right here, it indicates the bust line, waistline, and hip line. So when you see that marking on your patterns, that is what that symbol indicates. And most of the time, it'll have the finished garment measurement beside that symbol. It also talks about making an adjustment to lengthen and shorten your pattern, talks about your double thickness, your single thickness, all the same details. Their layout is just different, and they may have 1 or 2 things added that the other one doesn't. But again, these are your common and general directions that you will see across the board in your patterns. Well, that is all for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I really do hope that this video was helpful, especially if you're just learning to sew, if you want to start working with patterns, but it was a little overwhelming. I hope I was able to break it down for you in this video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on your notifications so you won't miss when part 3 of this series go live. I'll see you all then. Blessings, everyone. Bye.